statements, or beliefs expressed on the following program by the host, guests, or callers are not necessarily the opinions of FantasyAccess.com, Media Group Inc. ownership, management, sponsors, or website.
We unleash the Wolf Pack as we get the latest in the NFL and the Miami Dolphins with our KSDT CPA Pro Football Report with NFL Network insider Cameron Wolfe. KSDT is one of South Florida's largest and one of the country's fastest growing accounting firms. KSDT CPA is a full-service firm that also excels in crypto. Visit them at ksdtcpa.com or call 305-670-3370. Here's NFL insider Cameron Wolfe.
All right, locked and loaded and ready to go. It is game week, Cam.
It is.
Game week, bro. It's game week. Yes. I mean, we talk a lot. Twice a week.
Months. And now it's the real thing, right?
Now we get the real thing, dude. Finally, it's here. Cannot wait. So let me ask you, are you looking at the Dolphins as they should be a playoff team this year?
Absolutely. I was watching a little bit of Good Morning Football this morning, and they were putting together their playoff teams for each conference. And it was interesting to see that I think I just saw the first two, Jamie and Peter. And
Peter has the Dolphins in the – Peter's a Dolphin. Did you ask him, by the way, what I asked you to ask
Jamie
him?
And Kyle, actually. It was Jamie and Kyle. But
did you ask Peter what I asked you to ask him?
So Peter was not up there when I went up there. So he was out.
Okay.
But essentially, I haven't seen Peter's yet. And maybe you're right. But Jamie and Kyle, neither one had the Dolphins in the playoffs.
Okay.
Both of them had the Bills and the Jets in the playoffs. And so the reason why I find that interesting is because I think the narrative going into the season, especially with Aaron Rodgers' arrival, will be that the Jets have passed the Dolphins.
Yeah.
And the Dolphins, although people think they're still a good team, are third. And as I told you last week, I think the Dolphins have a real chance, and that's obviously with the caveat that Tua stays healthy, to win the division. I do believe if Tua plays 15-plus games, you get 15-plus games from your other stars, then they win the division. I think they have the talent to do it. I think Vic Fangio's rival helps them a lot. That being said,
this is the Jeremy Lin bullshit all over again. Anything New York gets overhyped.
but I will tell you this, and I have my concerns with New York, but the one thing that they are really, really good at, and it's not even Aaron Rodgers, it's that defense, man. That defense, and I will say this because I think it's true. That defense may be the best defense of football. They could be the best defense of football this year. Like, they're that good. On the outside with Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, that pass rush, they have like their backup pass rushers are their first round picks the last 2 years. Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson are backup pass rushers for that team. That shows you their depth in that group. And so that defense is amazing. And so I get the theory of that the defense is already arguably the best in football. If Aaron Rodgers just lifts us a little bit more, we should be X, Y, and Z. Makes a lot of sense. My issue is I have major concerns about their offensive line. Like, every team in the league outside of maybe 5 or 6 have offensive line concerns, but I put the Jets as maybe a top 5 team as far as concerns with their offensive line. Like, they're holding things together with strings. They're hoping Mekhi Becton can get through games. They're hoping 38-year-old Dwayne Brown can get through games as their tackle spots protecting a 39-year-old quarterback. And so to me, that gives me pause.
You got a shaky guard, too, on top of all of that.
Yes,
too.
absolutely. Absolutely. AVT is fine. Elijah Vera Tucker, he's one of the better players.
Yeah, no, he's a stud.
But the other side, questions. And so to me, that gives me some uneasiness. And then Garrett Wilson is an absolute stud. But other than him, I don't really – obviously Aaron Rodgers has his buddies and Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, but I just am concerned about the other weapons. I think Dalvin Cook's a good pickup for him because I do worry if Breece Hall's going to be the same guy coming back from that injury, especially early
Your
on.
offensive line ain't shit. Dalvin Cook's not going to be much, dude. Running back.
That's my worry, and that's why I think the Jets are still third. That's why I think the Jets are still third. That's essentially my premise. But
Tony Pauline is already reporting that the Jets are thinking of trading their depth on the D line to go get an offensive lineman. And the funny part is, there's no team out there with a spare offensive lineman. You're going to have to run into the situation of a team that's falling out of the playoffs, and they have a guy that they have to re-sign, but now they're at a crossroads and they're saying, let's go rebuild instead. And then this guy, we're not going to re-sign. And then maybe you can, some scenario like that. But nobody has spare offensive linemen, dude. And here's the funny part that I tell Dolphin fans. Look out. Look out if the Dolphins don't have the best offensive line in the division. Okay? It is that bad across the board all over the place.
Yeah, it's a rough, just as good.
Healthy, you may have the best offensive line in the division.
It's possible. I'm trying to think. So Buffalo has some issues with depth, but they're not awful, huh?
Well, they're shaky at their starters. A couple of their starters are like, they're not even sure about those guys.
Yeah, that's still a question for them. And then the Patriots,
that's a mess. That's a mess. That's a mess.
It's funny because we were talking about how good the Jets defense is. The Dolphins and the Bills and the Patriots all have really good defenses. Ideally for the Dolphins, the other two are more proven. The Patriots have been more proven. The Bills have been more proven. You're more kind of hoping the Dolphins with Vic Fangio. But I think there's a real chance that every team in this division has a top 10, maybe top 12 defense, while also maybe being in the bottom half of the offensive lines. And so it's just the way it's built. So yeah, you may be right. Maybe the Dolphins end up having an average offensive line, and that's better than the below average.
The other great offensive line, by the way. Don't anybody.
Right. That's why I'm like, I'm not trying to oversell. Saying the Dolphins have the best offensive line in anything is a little bit of a leap for me. That's why I was a little hesitant. But if you put it in the perspective of, hey, they may be middle of the pack, and the rest of the group are towards the back of the pack, I think that that has some validity.
That whole division, this whole division doesn't really sport a great offensive line anywhere, dude. It's everybody has problems. And I'm telling you, they could actually be the best out of that bunch, which is crazy.
Right.
Okay. What's interesting all I'm saying is the Dolphin fans, if you think that you're that bad on the O-line, trust me, they're saying the same thing in New England, in New York, and in Buffalo. They're all concerned about their O-line. Every one of them is concerned about their O-line.
Right.
Right. It's nuts. All right. Mike White named the backup. I'm going to go to the same thing I said last year. Either way, if Tua goes down, the guy that's coming off the bench, whether it was Teddy, whether it's Skyler, whether it's Mike, I don't think they save your season anyway. So, we're splitting hairs here, wondering whether it's Skyler or Mike White. I don't think either one's saving your season, to be quite honest.
Yeah. There was a quote that I always refer to when we talk about backup quarterbacks. I think I've told it to you before, and is Peyton Manning. And essentially, I think that it was like Curtis Painter and some other guy who was the backup there. And essentially, John Gruden was the analyst at that time when he was doing Monday Night Football. Asked their offensive coordinator Tom Moore, why is it Curtis Painter getting new practice snaps behind Peyton Manning? Like, what happens if he gets hurt? And Tom Moore tells them, if Peyton gets hurt, we're screwed. Or he actually says fucked. We're fucked. And we don't practice fucked. And I always remember that when we start to talk about backup quarterbacks, because the reality is, especially how Tua has established himself in his career, this team, no matter who, if it's Mike White or Skylar Thompson, cannot afford a significant amount of time with Tua hurt. If Tua's done, the season is done. It is that simple. You could say, oh, well, Mike White might be able to keep us afloat with Tyreek and Waddle. And no, if it's a game or two, maybe. But we saw what happened last year. Tua missed 4 or 5 games, and the team became a bottom 5 team in those 4 or 5 games. and it's that drastic. And so, did Mike White beat out Skylar Thompson? I'm not sure. Like, Skylar looked a lot better in most of camp, and then Mike White looked better in the preseason games for the most part.
Or did Skylar beat himself out with the last outing that he looked
fantastic? That's why I'm like, I don't have a strong argument either way. Like, before preseason, I would have told you Skylar for sure is playing better and should be the backup based off of camp and OTAs. Then the preseason games happen, and like you said, particularly the last game where Skylar throws all those picks and really throws himself out. And he's like, it's hard for me to make a strong argument that Skylar, should no doubt beat the backup. The new rule, as Mike McDaniel was mentioning, does provide them with the opportunity for all three to technically be eligible. And the way I read up on it, just to get a little bit more information, just the way it works, just kind of so anybody wonders about the San Francisco situation last year, you have your starting quarterback and your backup quarterback counting as one of the, I think it's 46 or 47, whatever the number is, active on game days, right? If Tua got hurt, and if, let's say, Mike White got hurt, Skylar's already dressed. He doesn't count as one of the 46 or 47 numbers, but he's eligible to play as the quarterback in that situation, and he's dressed. It only in a situation where Tua and Mike White can't come back.
Right, that's fine.
And so essentially a situation. And so Skylar would dress every game. Ideally, he does not play unless both Tua and Mike White get hurt in the same game.
Yeah. And by the way, smart move by the league. We can't get to the point where there's no quarterback on the field and stuff like that. I went to a game once as a kid. We were playing the Bears, and Miami knocks out all their quarterbacks, and Walter Payton ended up playing the game at quarterback.
Yep.
And they shut Walter Payton down too. I think he might have had maybe 44 yards in that game or something like that. Those were the days where Miami was unbeatable at the Orange Bowl.
Right.
We're just walking in there going, whoever the opponent is, you're fucked. That kind of stuff. It was fun walking to the stadium with that kind of confidence back in those days. That was always a lot of fun. Robbie Chosen has found his way back onto the practice squad. Good for him. The Armstead stuff, I'm not reading much into it until Wednesday, right? If he doesn't practice Wednesday, then to me, he didn't need to practice Monday. So I'm not really looking into this until Wednesday. I need to see that Wednesday he's not practicing. Then maybe I'm a little nervous about game one. Your thoughts on that?
So first, how many? I couldn't count how many Chosen jokes I got when I tweeted about Robbie Chosen to the practice squad. Dolphins, he was chosen to the practice squad. Anyway, people have a lot of fun with his name and all the name changes. And anyway, he's eligible to be called up at any point. The same practice squad rules as always. Up to 3 times you can be called up. And so he's a guy that can provide them more wide receiver depth if they need it, or either early in the season or in a pinch later in the season when some guys get hurt. Teron Armstead, I'm going to prepare you guys for this. It is going to be very much, I won't say it's going to be the whole year. There's a very good chance that you're going to look at Teron Armstead much how you did last year, where every single week he's going to practice little to none, and he's going to have a questionable label on Friday, and he's most likely going to play. But you won't know for sure, and he may miss a couple games where it just does not feel right. Last year it was a toe. This year it's going to be a combination of different things. And the reality with Teron Armstead is that he won't be 100%. He's not starting the season 100%, and he won't be 100% for much of the year. But he's going to play through it, and I'd expect him, at least at this stage, to be there for week 1.
Yeah, I expect him to be there week 1. I just, I think for this week, I'd like to see him at least practice a little bit.
It would be nice, but Mike McDaniel mentioned it. He's the one guy who could go through the week without practicing. I think you're probably, I think they probably like to see him out there for at least one or 2 days.
What kind of conditioning does he do? Do we know? Do we know what kind of, like, if he's not practicing, he's got to do something for wind.
He's working out. He's lifting, and he does a lot of cardio stuff. But I don't know how much running he's able to do right now on his feet and legs. So I think it's a little bit more like offensive line cardio.
Might be like an elliptical, which is easy on the joints.
Yeah, probably something like that, or something like a bike or something like that. Either way,
I'd be interested to know what does he do.
If I get a chance, I'll ask him. What I will say is that he's always in tremendous shape. Like I've never seen him out of shape, which you would be surprised to say, because like you said, if you're an offensive lineman who hadn't practiced in 3 weeks, most bigger dudes, 300+ pound dudes, if you don't do any major activity for 3 weeks, it's going to be hard for them to get through 70, 75 plays in the game. But I've never had that issue with Teron, which is probably why I haven't asked that question, but it's probably worth asking.
I think it's time to ask, because I find it incredibly intriguing how he can take snaps for 4 quarters and yet he's not practicing, but he has to be able to do something to build endurance.
Right.
So there's something that's going on there that he does. I don't know if it's pool work. I don't know if it's an elliptical. I don't know what it is, but there has to be something. And so I find that very interesting to see. Okay, you can't practice, so how do you build your stamina, build up to the week? Because it is really impressive how you don't practice and yet you play. And
right,
dude, how the fact that he played in that playoff game, Cam.
Yep.
And that guy had like 8,000 injuries in that that game.
He's tougher. People always give him flack for the injuries, but I don't think they give him enough credit for how tough he is to play with it. Like, this is a guy who naturally, he actually came up, and he talked a little bit about this on GMFB. He came up from HBCU track. And so this is a guy who naturally, when he was coming into college, was more 240, 250. He's not naturally a 315, 320 pound dude. Like, in fact, I'd imagine, and just for something that's going to be, maybe a couple of years from now, but when Teron Armstead retires, I'd imagine he's going to be one of those dudes who quickly drops down to 240, 250 again, because he has to put on weight. And so I think you look at some of these dudes who are in that category, as you get older, it's a lot of times tougher on your body. It's tougher on your body to put on sort of the manufactured weight rather than what your traditional build is. And I think that a lot of times compounds injuries, especially on the lower half of the body. If I'm built to be like, I'm roughly 200 pounds, right? I'm built to be roughly a 200 pound man. If I ballooned up to 260, 270 pounds, I guarantee you I'm going to start to have some issues on my joints. I'm going to have to start itching on my knees and my ankles and stuff like that, because my body's built, right? As you can probably attest to, right? Your body was built for a certain weight, and you get used to it a little bit more and more, but it's still like your body's like, all right, this is, that's a lot, especially if you're doing movement and different stuff like that. And so I think that's probably the result of Teron Armstead's injuries, not just him being, he's fragile or he's not tough. I would think it's quite the opposite.
All right, last question. Scenarios are completely different, but you kind of need your moment. And we have like this group of people that are probably rooting against Deion Sanders. And he had his moment this weekend, here you go, sticking where the sun don't shine. Right. And Mario Cristobal this past weekend, his team was a disaster last year on a consistent basis. Right. And while he beat a crappy team, he had his moment where his team looked responsible, respectable. They played like a real football team. They weren't making stupid mistakes, all those kind of things. So he had his moment in a way. Well, Mike McDaniel last year did not do well against his former contemporaries.
Yep.
And he won once. And so last year he was thoroughly embarrassed by Brandon Staley. And so was Tua. So I would imagine that Tua is going to be motivated on this. But I put this more on the coach, because I think the coach is the one that didn't counterpunch the right way with what was going on with the Chargers. How much does Mike McDaniel need a moment himself to respond to what happened last year in that game with the Chargers? Because that was kind of the beginning of the end.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's probably maybe an underrated storyline here, because it's week 1. But the Chargers had sort of quote unquote the blueprint. And it was interesting watching Mike McDaniel on video yesterday and how he was answering some of the questions about the Chargers game. You could tell it bothered him a little bit. He was kind of ticked off with the assumption that, hey, the Chargers had this whole, stop the Dolphins game plan. He's like, they're not reinventing defense. He's making jokes about Ronaldo Hill coming here and the impact there versus Brandon Staley. But what that tells me, just from the little bit I know Mike McDaniel, is that it does bother him. It does bother him, the idea that he was outcoached by whatever metric somebody says that, or that some scheme figured out his scheme. He's a schemer. As much as he jokes with us and has fun and has his personality, what the core of him is building game plans, being creative, and establishing an offense that is difficult to stop. And that day, in the following week against San Francisco, they made it look like Mike McDaniel was not Mike McDaniel. And so I am very eager to see how he responds, because guess what? And I'll tell you this, there are people around the league I've talked to that believe that, okay, year 2 in Mike McDaniel's scheme, we figured some things out. They're not going to be able to run and have the effectiveness. We have something for them this year, essentially, that we're going to show Mike McDaniel. He's got the personality that I think we in the media love, but not everybody loves the fact that he's, that vibe across teams across the league. And so I think there's a feel from people I've talked to that, hey, if they don't switch anything up, they're not going to be as effective because we've adjusted. And so that's why I'm so eager, because Mike McDaniel, knowing him, has been working. And there's been some things that we haven't seen that he is like. I don't think he's naive to the fact that defenses were sitting on inside routes and playing inside leverage and essentially saying, oh, they like to run in routes. I think they were number 1 or number 2 in the league in breaking routes, essentially your slants, your crossing routes, that sort of thing. And so teams were essentially challenging them to throw outside the numbers. It's not something they did very frequently. How does Mike McDaniel adjust to that? Because even with Ronaldo Hill gone, the Chargers are going to look at their game plan last year and say, why don't we do some of the same stuff? Why don't we see if they fixed it? It's the same personnel, same quarterback, same receivers. You add a slot receiver, but other than that, same receivers, same running back, same offensive line. So same coach. Let's see if they change. Let's see if they adjust. And I think that's going to be a big question for Mike McDaniel early.
And Ronaldo will know their weaknesses. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That'll help them. But to me, that helps them. That helps the Dolphins defense more against the Chargers offense. I'm referring more about the Dolphins offense against the Chargers defense.
Yeah, but Ronaldo coached that defense, didn't he?
Yes, absolutely.
So he's going to know those players' weaknesses.
Correct.
You're right.
So absolutely.
He may walk into that offensive meeting and say,
right. Sorry, there was a brain fart there. Yes, absolutely. He's going to have some knowledge of those defensive players. A lot of those dudes are coming back. And so, it's going to be a fun matchup of ideas, of coaching styles. I can't wait. I'm actually not going to be at this game. I got a Cleveland matchup. I'm Browns-Bengals this week for NFL Network. But that our game's at 1:00 and the Chargers game is at 4:25 Eastern. And so I'm going to be, as soon as I finish my post-game interview, I'm going to find somewhere in Cleveland to watch the game, and I'll be tuning in because it'll be a
Am I
fun
supposed to say Cleveland, Cincinnati, yay for you? Am I supposed to say that?
I think it's a good game. Obviously, I would rather be in LA or Miami as a city, but I am excited. Joe Burrow should be out there. Deshaun Watson's got a year 2 with a new type of offense, and it's the Battle of Ohio. The Browns, I think, have won 4 straight against the Bengals, which is an interesting little nugget there. I don't think people expect it. So I think it's one of the better games of the weekend that I have. But would I rather be in a city like LA or a city like Miami? Of course. Nobody really signs up and says, hey, I'm super pumped to go to Cleveland. I think Joe can know.
Send my dude to LA, bro.
But here's my thing. Here's why I cannot complain. I usually have a great setup. I live in the South, so they typically keep me in the South. And so most times in the year, I am in Miami, in Jacksonville, in Atlanta, in Carolina, in Tampa, in Nashville. So I've got warm places and so this would be the time for me to go up north in Cleveland in September when it's probably going to be 70 degrees. And so I'm not going to complain too much, because, it could be worse.
No, I got you.
If I'm still getting a bunch of Cleveland and Buffaloes in December and January, maybe my tune changes. But right now, I'm just happy to cover football again, and I'm happy I've got a good game.
That is rough. All right, follow him on Twitter at Cameron Wolfe and catch his exceptional work there at the NFL Network. And, of course, he'll be back here on Friday. Cam, as always, thank you, my brother. Appreciate you immensely.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
This has been the KSDT CPA Pro Football Report with NFL insider Cameron Wolfe. KSDT is recognized by Forbes as one of the top tax accounting firms for 2022. KSDT CPA is a full-service firm that also excels in crypto. Visit them at ksdtcpa.com or call 305-670-3370.